Good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Newzroom Afrika Channel 405. Our live and continuing coverage of the Brics Summit continues. The main point today, of course, the decision announced earlier today by President Cyril Ramaphosa to include 6 more nations in the Brics group of countries. That, of course, is going to lead to changes to how Brics operates. Earlier, you would also have seen Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, talking about how the world has changed and therefore the way that the world has governed has changed. Well, that, of course, finding huge resonance with some of the comments here today. Joining me now is the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana. Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time. I've had 2 cabinet ministers already say they believe it has been a success financially. Do you think what we've seen here in Sandton over the last few days is going to be a success for our economy over the longer term?
Over the long term, it's going to be a success for our economy. Let me just say, for the first time, we have never seen a Brics meeting of this magnitude, which has pulled the global south together in the manner it has done. That's the first point. The second point is that if you see the sort of economies that were represented in this gathering are so massive that if we capitalize on that, it's likely to have major spinoffs.
There's going to be, we've got 6 new countries in Brics. Saudi Arabia comes with quite a lot of oil money that they're trying to spend in various ways in various places. Do you think there's going to be a lot more money in Brics, a lot more money in the new development bank, a lot more money may be available for infrastructure spending for us and other countries as a result of this expansion?
Let me just point out that 3 of those countries are already members of the Brics Bank. Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Emirates. So by joining the political formation is already a confirmation of an existing relationship. So they're putting a lot of money as well as part of their shareholding into the new development bank, which increases its capital base and its ability to provide loans. You must have seen over the last week how many of the project pipeline they've indicated they want to support in South Africa.
There's been a lot of talk about more lending, more trading in local currencies. How difficult is that to do in practice? I mean, there's quite a lot of technicalities that need to be managed.
There are a lot of let me just say, here's the point. We've got Botswana next door. If we've got sufficient pullers to pay them in pullers, there's no reason why we should not pay them in pullers if we buy something from Botswana. There's no reason if they've got sufficient rands not to pay us in rands. This is the point I'm trying to make. So that's what local currencies mean. That's the first point. There's a second point which is related to the Brics Bank, the new development bank. What that means is that the new development bank, they've done last week. Last week they've raised bonds worth about 1.5 billion in local currencies, and they are going to fund projects in South Africa with that 1.5 billion. The problem is that the amount is insufficient to fund the project pipeline they have announced. So the gap is likely still to be funded in dollars. That's basically this deepening of local currency and trading between the Brics countries.
The idea of de-dollarization was a big talking point as we came into this. You, I think, pretty quickly, and I think maybe consistently, if I've understood it correctly, have sort of said that was not going to happen. Do you think it will ever happen, or is it just not going to happen now?
Let's distinguish between the talk outside the meetings.
Sure.
In the media and some political commentators, and it's what's happening inside. 2 things which have been mentioned, which have never been part of the discourse. The first one is the de-dollarization and the Brics currency, which were imposed and we're forced to respond to it. We're not part of the discourse, and we're forced to respond to it and, as part of the discussion. What is key? There are a lot of limitations with that argument. If we were to say, for instance, you have got a Brics currency, a couple of things you need to do. First, you've got to have a central bank, common central bank. B, you've got to lose your monetary policy independence. And thirdly, there are already countries like China whose currency is internationally is competitive to the dollar and other in euros and dollar, and the Chinese are wanted to be treated as well as a reserve currency. So Will they agree to take a step back? You know, it's a complicated debate.
One of the things that is going to happen now in BRICS, I think, is that the nature of BRICS may change because of the 6 nations that come in.
Yeah.
So you make the point correctly, of course, that some of them already belong to the BRICS Bank. But do you think that's going to change the nature of the economic discussions we see around the world? The fact that it's going to be a bit more about the Global South, the fact that the Global South now has a sort of forum of its own, not an exclusive forum maybe, not a forum directed against the West maybe, but certainly a forum of its own where it can raise issues. The fact Antonio Guterres is here is an important factor, I think. It shows you how seriously he takes this.
I mean, let me give you an example using the MySpace, which is a financial site. If you look at the World Bank and IMF, they're formed by 44 countries in 1944. All right? Their membership base is exceedingly about 190 countries at the moment. Now, which even its composition has changed and the demands on it requires a different kind of a World Bank, a different kind of an IMF. That's why the debate about the evolution roadmap for the DFIs is part of that. Everybody recognizes that. By the way, the debate about the evolution was started by Janet Yellen on the 6th of October last year. So everybody recognizes that there needs to be a change. And what that change is an important part. The Global South also need institutions whose landing criteria is likely to talk to their specific needs. And I think institutions such as NDB are beginning to emerge precisely because they are talking to specific country needs than the generic approach the existing Bretton Woods institutions provide.
So as a result of that, do you expect there to be more funding available for infrastructure for us?
There are a couple of things which are happening. The NDB is but one institution. There's an investment infrastructure bank of which we're part. There's the Chinese attempt, Silk, whatever, Belt and Six Road approach. But in South Africa, we've got sufficient resources internally in the country. What we need to do is to design the instruments for utilizing those resources.
In other words, we need to get the private sector to stop the investment strike and invest in infrastructure.
No, I don't believe in that. Let me just say, if we were to ask any of the private sector guys and said, do you want to invest in infrastructure and government? Let's use infrastructure as a start. All of them will say, hallelujah, we want to invest, but give us an instrument. Yeah? That's what we're designing at the moment. We'll say something about it on the 25th of October.
There's been obviously a lot of talk about 2 months ago about AGOA and our access to the United States markets and the sort of preferential access that we get through AGOA. There was a time when it seemed that quite a few companies were very worried that we would sort of not qualify or not be allowed back into AGOA. Are those fears receding a little bit for various reasons?
I'm sure. I mean, the expert on that matter was my colleague, Minister Patel. But I'll say 2 things about this. There were 2 debates about it. First is the forum, which is supposed to be held in South Africa. There was a threat that they will hold the forum elsewhere. Secondly is our continued participation and qualification in AGOA. Both of which I think, in the light of the discussion we've had, together with Minister Patel, we had engaged the Americans on this matter. I think that both are on track.
So you'll be feeling a bit more confident than...
Yes.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Enoch Godongwana is the Minister of Finance.